if you'll all bear with me, I will keep doing the dreary monologue while staring at the right-hand side of my screen to watch as people file into the electronic room. Here we go. Probably when we get to about 2/3 of our expected audience, which will mean when we get to about 40 or something, 40 or 50 people, I will say we'll actually call this event to a formal start. Still a few people coming in. Right, I think numbers might be stabilizing. Yeah, I think we'll have some more people joining us, no doubt, in the next few minutes. But I think we've now got around about a good chunk of people. There are about 50 of you in the room, so welcome all to the Virtual Social Market Foundation. If we haven't met before, I'm James Kirkup. I'm the director of the SMF. You are here today, I hope you know, for our In Conversation With session with the Baroness Stowell of Beeston in the county of Nottinghamshire, or Tina, as I'm going to call her for this session. Now, Tina has today published with the SMF her paper on the education divide and respect. Now, if you look in the chat panel, one of my colleagues has put a link to that report in the chat panel, so you can read it. Just to give you a quick idea of format and housekeeping this morning. As I said earlier on, to those of you who are here very early, we are recording this session, hence the red light at the top left-hand corner of your screen. It's also going out simultaneously onto our YouTube channel. So just bear that in mind when we get to the questions from the audience, that when you are asking questions, commenting, your questions will be preserved for all eternity and are going out to the broader internet, as well as the people in this cozy room. In terms of format, Tina and I will chat for, I don't know, about 20 minutes, half an hour, until she gets sick of me, basically, about the report and the issues it raises, and then we'll get a hand over to all of you for your questions and observations. When we do that, there will be an option to go on camera. My colleagues, Rhiannon and Hannah, are in the electronic wings waiting to spotlight you and put you on camera and on audio if you want to ask a question directly, or if you like, you can type your questions into the chat or the Q&A panels. I'll try and model them both, and I can synthesize them and put them to Tina on your behalf. But we'll get there anyway. I'll say all that again when we come to that bit of the session. So without any further ado, or with a bit of further ado, we actually turn to Tina. Say good morning. How are you?
Morning, James. Thank you.
We haven't done the your august list of achievements and chronicles and heraldry as we should do, but broadly speaking, a quick potted summary of Tina Stowell, for those of you who don't know. Former leader of the House of Lords, former chair of the Charity Commission, former senior BBC executive, a familiar figure in the upper echelons of our national life, should we say, which is very relevant to the report that she's published today. I'll give you a quick opportunity to summarize the report. I mean, your starting point for this paper is, the educational divide is the big division in our society today. It's the gap, the difference between people who hold university degrees and people who don't. That you say is the big dividing line that we've been talking about in politics, in society, and economics. Never mind class, never mind age, never mind all the other divisions that we talk about. Education for you is the thing. So why do you say that? Why is education such a big deal, do you think?
Well, and first of all, I must say, James, thank you very much to you and to the SMF for publishing my paper this morning and for hosting this event. I'm really grateful. And thank you to everybody who's taken their time to join us. Yes, as you say, what all the evidence is showing us now is that education, not class, is the main dividing line in politics today. But it's not the people who don't have degrees, the people who didn't go to university, who don't really understand what is going on or who need to change, because what the dramatic events of the last few years have been are symptoms, not the cause of this division. And what I'm arguing in this paper today is that we're going to have to get used to that kind of turmoil unless the graduate class decision-making, powerful and influential people really understand what is driving that division and put right where things are going wrong. But what I'm keen to emphasize is this is not an exercise in damage limitation. This is actually a real opportunity, because in an increasingly complex world where we're facing many important challenges, we've got the opportunity to achieve more and actually do better at meeting some of these challenges.
And just to stick with the politics of this for a second before we get to the social and economic bits. And I should say this paper all comes about because of the origins of it ultimately, a speech you gave in the House of Lords about two or 3 years ago, I think, which I read because I like sitting up at night reading Lord's Hansard for fun, and thought was very good. There, I think I remember you talking in that debate about the Brexit referendum and the election of Donald Trump, and you talked about those things as a symptom, a symptom of essentially this sort of political disregard for non-graduates. I mean, do you think if politics doesn't start giving a bit more regard and respect to people who didn't go to university, therefore we're looking at more ruptures, more disruptive electoral events on a par with the Brexit vote and the Trump election?
Well, I think it's hard to predict, but I think what we have seen over the last few years is voters recognizing that they are actually sort of very powerful, and I think that it's politicians need to, and indeed business leaders need to understand actually who is the most powerful set of people sort of in society today, and it is people who have a vote. But I suppose it's worth just taking a step back, because whilst the first time that you and I discussed this topic was after I made a speech in 2019, as you have just said. This has been a topic of interest to me for nearly 15 years, and is the reason why I put myself forward to go into public life again, I suppose, on the front line. And it's sort of around about 2008, off the back of the sort of crash and exacerbated by the MP's expenses scandal, I became very conscious and aware of people that I know expressing sort of their concern about, those who that they may have looked up to in the past, people who they would see and consider as more educated than them, feeling let down by them. And then when we got to the election in 2010, and I make reference to this in the paper, I was very struck by the incident between Gordon Brown and Mrs. Duffy. Now, we all remember that incident, but the thing which was very striking to me at the time was the fact that she referred to him as an educated man, and that she was baffled that this powerful, educated person who she had taken the time to speak to and thought she was trying to help him define and understand a problem, didn't actually appreciate what she had said, and in fact, expressed quite, sort of was quite disrespectful in insulting terms. When we then throw forward to 2016, and we saw the results of the referendum, the thing which was not surprising to me at that time was what we then learned about the educational divide being the most significant factor in that event. And of course, we saw the same in the Trump election later on that year. And since then, there's been a lot of academic research showing and reinforcing that the education divide, is very much the significant division in society. And those who are particularly interested in American politics. I mean, there's a guy, who's a bit of a rock star at the moment, David Shaw. He's talking about it all the time in terms of, the difference between graduates and non-graduates. So this is a topic that people are really now starting to become interested in, and I'm pleased that that is the case. But I think that we need to see that this is really, excuse me, this is actually a proxy for respect. And what I say in the paper is that this has been fueled by the sort of focus, as it were, and the valuation of degrees as the main currency for whether people are able to get on in life, and also whether or not they are taken seriously by the people who are in the decision-making roles. Because now what we've seen over the last 10 or 20 years is an increasing domination in decision-making positions of people who are graduates. And what I'm saying is that this has come at the expense of other credentials that anybody who is trying to get on in life are sort of, should be, should be sort of, present and seen and displayed by everybody. And what's happening is that those who are not going to university are still relying on those to succeed and get on. Those who are going to university are less concerned about these kind of credentials. So what's happening is that the non-graduates are either not being able to achieve fulfill their potential sometimes, that also that when they make a contribution and are successful, because a lot of these people, are successful people. These are not people to be pitied. These are not people, who are not making a contribution, but their contribution is not being properly recognized. And then worse still, what's happening is when they look at the decision makers, they're not seeing on display to the extent that they need to, the sort of characteristics that they would expect to see from people in positions of authority. And that therefore is starting to, or has, led to some sort of breakdown in society. The glue that bonds us together has started to fray.
So there's a lot in that to unpack, to use a modern verb, and I'll try and there's a few bits I want to go through. But starting with, just to amplify a little bit your core point about that growth in the graduate domination of the top jobs, whatever they are, whether and it's pretty start with Parliament politics. We now essentially have a graduate Parliament. I can't remember the figures at the moment. It's sort of high 80s% of MPs are graduates. I did a quick check this morning, and the current cabinet. This current cabinet is relatively unusual. I think there are three non-graduates in cabinet. Or non-university graduates. One went to Sandhurst, one to Agricultural College, and I think Nadine Dorries is the only member of cabinet who did not do some form of formal tertiary education. And you look across business, across the media, where I used to work. The media has become a graduate profession. Journalists used to be a trade, where now we must stop saying that. Graduate journalists are now by and large graduates. National conversation is now dominated by graduates, and this is your point, that the country feels like it is run by and for graduates, and therefore people who did not graduate, did not go to university, don't feel like their culture and values, the things that they expect, are being properly respected by the people in charge. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think as far as sort of the picture as it's as it stands in Parliament or in business, we've always seen people in positions of responsibility usually sort of have high academic credentials, and there's a majority of them, and that's right. We want people who are in positions of responsibility to be well educated. Now what you see is, a real sort of domination, and it's good to hear that the current cabinet is becoming sort of a bit more diverse in terms of educational attainment. But what I think has happened is that there's a sort of people who are holding these positions of responsibility, whether it's in business or politics, they define success in their own image. And assume, therefore, that everybody is trying to succeed in the same way that they are, so to trying to sort of attain positions of responsibility that means that they are making decisions about the lives making decisions that affect the lives of others. And even if they are from working class backgrounds, most of them have come through the same sort of route and pathway to that, to their own version of success. So therefore, their assumption is that is what everybody else is seeking to achieve. And what's happened is, over time, is that people who are not seeking to, not aspiring for that sort of type of success, or are making a contribution, or are successful in a different way, don't get the same level of recognition that people who are sort of in these positions. Or what we've also seen at the same time is that a lot of jobs, in fact now, most jobs which are considered to be sort of jobs of value are really only open to people who have been through university. So that's where you sort of you start to see sort of the distance, and then that's compounded, as I say, by the fact that some of the standards that people rely on and uphold in order to be successful are not given the same level of importance as academic qualifications, and therefore sort of they don't feel that their sort of their input and their effort is fully recognised and taken seriously.
Yeah, no, and I think yes, that's. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. And I guess I speak as someone who, I last time I checked on sort of the standard metric of sort of socioeconomic background, I would count as someone who grew up from a working class home, who went to university, and I've ended up spending my entire career at Westminster. And it probably took me a little while to recognise that actually that is not the only way to succeed. But I'm very aware of being part of a group that often unconsciously assumes that success is going to university and probably leaving the place where you grew up, probably moving to London. And if you don't do that, if you're not in that half of the population, then somehow, well, you didn't quite make it. And I think that's which you're right, is a fundamental form of disrespect. On this point about sort of respect from the people in charge. I'm going to come back to the people in charge because you're one of them and you're unusual, but we'll do the personal bit in a minute. This point about respect, you say in the paper, you talk about the respect that we give, the authority that is invested in traditional non-graduate roles. You talk about bus drivers, people like that. The fact that sort of once upon a time, if you drove a bus, you were regarded as you had a degree of authority in the community because you were seen as doing something vital and necessary. And you argue that jobs like that have lost that esteem, and the consequence of that is that people doing those jobs don't necessarily feel as empowered, as respected by others. How can we get back to that? How if your argument is that's a thing we've lost as authority figures in the community, what can be done to restore that esteem, do you think?
Well, in the paper, I propose sort of 3 principles, as it were, to bridge the education divide, and they are sort of purpose, standards, and intelligence. And I mean, just to focus on purpose for a moment, what I think is critical. I mean, is and these three principles, by the way, what they are principles which should apply to any and all of us, whatever kind of ambition we have, aspirations that we have, whatever we're trying to achieve in life. And clearly we'll all need different sort of skills and qualifications for our different kind of goals. There are certain things which we all need. And we all need to live a purposeful life. We all need to feel that we are part of something which is bigger than ourselves, that we are not just functionaries. We're not just people who do jobs or process things, that we're part of something bigger. And I think what you see in some of those roles, you mentioned sort of bus driver, whether it's a bus driver, whether it's, a local shopkeeper, jobs, postmen, jobs that are in the community and that are important, that we've reduced them to functions, and we need to see them. We need to understand and be clear about the purpose of them. And we need the people who are in those roles to understand that they are valued by the rest of us. And so, a lot of this also comes back to, leadership. So those of us who are in these positions of authority and responsibility, we need to start seeing that the roles that we are responsible for, whether they are a part of a chain of local government or whatever, or whether these are roles within our organizations, if they are businesses that we are set up, they all need to have a purpose, and that they need to have some authority in order for them to, if they are roles in a community, we need to respect the authority that comes with those roles and encourage them to exercise that authority to help us start to promote the standards that are critical for a cohesive and prosperous society.
Now, I am coming back. You've talked about people in authority. That's you. I'm coming back to that. But okay. before we get there, I just want to dwell a little bit on the university sector, because I think we've got some friends from HE joining us today. And as you know, there's a very live debate in politics generally about the role and value of higher education. Yeah, frankly, there's a lot of university bashing goes on for a variety of reasons. And I don't think your paper counts as university bashing. I probably wouldn't have published it if I did. But what is the role, do you think, was the proper role of universities and HE? Do they need to change? Do universities need to change? Are we getting it right? Are universities themselves getting it right in this year? Given the division that some of their graduates are, or all of their graduates are involved with, in your view?
Well, I'm definitely not bashing universities, and and I believe in education, and I believe in the importance of education, and I believe that as many people who for whom university is the right pathway, they should follow it. So so I wouldn't want anybody to think this is I've got a downer on that at all. I do think that there's probably some people who go to university who shouldn't have to go to university in order to feel valued and get on in life. So, I'm not sure that everybody who goes, it's necessary for them to do so. And as I say, I think my main concern is the, concentration of university degrees at the expense of other kind of credentials, which are, not about passing exams, which should be as important to somebody who goes to university as somebody who doesn't go to university. So, when I think of somebody who goes to university, I can respect I want to respect the input, the effort that they have made in order to achieve the qualifications that they gain. but I also would like to see them use their knowledge and apply their knowledge in a way which displays the kind of characteristics that somebody who doesn't go to university and gains their knowledge through experience would do so. And I suppose the point I'm sort of trying to get to, James, is that, in terms of intelligence, which is, one of the other principles I sort of outline in my paper, there are lots of different forms of intelligence, and there are different kinds of knowledge. As I say, you can get knowledge through books, you can get knowledge through experience, but how you apply that knowledge is what is really important. And if you have been through university, then it's important that you also sort of want to work with and take advantage of people's, other people's perspective and knowledge. And you need to be able to sort of, show and share similar kind of standards as other people in order for that collaboration, for that kind of working together to work and be successful.
So in terms of operationalizing this, how we make it work in organizations, and I'm start from I'll start with you, because there's a challenge here for politics, for government, for business, for the media, for organizations, possibly even think tanks that sort of help sort of set the national tone. So what do we do to change the way we think and the way we act? And I'm just wondering, do you think this starts with recruitment? I mean, I just as you're talking, I was thinking about the SMF. We're a little organisation. We're very lucky to recruit fairly often. Lots of bright young things. And we always, we make clear in our recruitment notices that you don't need to have a degree to work here. We don't set any minimum education requirement for applying for a job. We ask people when they apply to institution blind their CVs, so we don't know when I sift applications, I don't know which university someone went to, which college, which school, all the rest of it. I don't, all I can see is the qualifications they've got. But even so, I'm trying to think back over the last 3 or 4 rounds of applications we've done for jobs. I can't remember even getting an application for one of our jobs from anyone who didn't have at least 1 university degree, and quite a lot now have 2. Which, I mean, I'm doing this as sort of very personal and introspective. Given that I preach from the same gospel as you on this stuff sometimes, I feel like I should do more to try and cast our recruiting net wider to people who did not go to not go to university. I think lots of other big recruiters should do more too. How do you think how can we do better on that?
Well, I mean, I think, for a think tank to be recruiting sort of for the kind of jobs that you are recruiting to, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that you are likely to recruit university graduates. But I think, part is, again, a consequence of where we've got to, which is any kind of office-based job now seems to require, or people who apply for these kind of jobs seem to be people who have been through university. And that is, that's, we're losing out to a certain extent, on that, because what it means is that, we're cutting off the route to leadership roles for people who have not been through that path. And and what's happening therefore is, and the reason why we're sort of, we're seeing this sort of turmoil politically is because everybody then who is contributing, whether it's in politics or whether it's in think tanks or in business, there's a sort of same kind of perspective and outlook on things, which is very much based on an intellectual sort of perspective. It's based on a sort of, on a training and a thought process, which is all about, rational thinking and sort of theories and what have you. Now, that's not a bad thing, but it just means that it's very narrow and it's very restricted. And And I think that, there's a sort of, what I'm saying to, particularly to larger organizations, I think it would be challenging for an organization as small as the SMF, but to larger organizations,
medium size, please.
but is that, you've got to think a bit more creatively. Now, I know, because I saw it the other day, wrote a small piece about KPMG's decision. Okay, so KPMG, for anybody who's not followed this, they announced a week or two ago that they were going to recruit more people from working class backgrounds. And so that's fine. That's I'm not saying that's a bad thing. But to me, what would be more interesting, I hope alongside that, by the way, if they're talking about, I don't know whether they're meaning specifically sort of accountancy roles or whatever. I hope
I think it was, they said that they are setting a target of by 2030, they want to have 29% of their senior managers and partners coming from a working class background. Judging on which is based on on the occupational class of the highest earner in your household at the age of 14. Now, at the moment, they're at about 20%. So effectively, they want a 9-point bump in the number of partners from that background in 9 years.
Okay. So, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but I'm saying if all of those people who come from a working class background have been through university, KPMG in 20 years' time or whatever it's not going to look any different to what it looks now. So, I tend to agree. Yeah, I think I
made. Yes, I know that was the point I made in a newspaper column.
So it's interesting.
You could recruit me and claim that you increased your working class diversity. But that's ridiculous. I'm a effete middle class so and so living in a nice South London. I'm not.
So to me, if you take my 3 principles as I've outlined in the paper of purpose, standards and intelligence, what I would find more interesting if KPMG were to say, right, okay, we're going to worry. I don't know what their values are, but I'm sure they've got corporate values. We're not going to sort of, obsess too much about our values, which might be sort of, things like be kind or whatever it is. We're going to actually be clear that everybody in this organization, whoever they are, whether the person on reception or the top dog partner, that, we're all going to know how we contribute to the purpose of this organization. Everybody in this organization is going to have a clear purpose. They're going to feel that they are actually have a stake in the success of this organization. We're going to set out some clear standards that we are all going to hold each other to account by. And the sort of standards that I outline in my paper are things which require an element of self-discipline, because that then requires you to act in a way which shows respect to the other people you are relying on for you to succeed individually or for you all to succeed collectively. And the third thing I'd say is that, we recognize that intelligence comes in all forms. So what we want our managers to do is to be trained to spot by knowing that everybody in this organization is clear about their purpose, by knowing that, standards matter. And, we're going to be able to sort of, see those kind of and display in the way in which people work. Our managers are going to be much more alive to the fact that there are people in this organization doing jobs that may not be on a pathway to partner, but they're showing intelligence which is, potentially valuable to us and is going to help us define problems more clearly and is going to make us more successful. And we're going to spot these people and we're going to find ways of promoting them and putting them on a pathway, if they want to be, that actually sort of makes them, sort of puts them into leadership roles because they're displaying everything else. Now, that to me would be more interesting.
There's 10 questions I could ask, but I'm not going to. I'm trying to ask two quick questions before I hand over to the audience. One, I'm going to revert to my old trade. If I was a reporter coming along to this thing and looking to make some news, the question I would ask you would be, okay, you just talked about big employers and doing more to value people who didn't have degrees. Do you think that job adverts should not specify must have relevant degree? Should that be banned, or should that be, because it still happens, you still see, to benchmark our ads, I look at other people's recruitment, and quite a lot of people still recruit saying you must have a relevant degree. So should we abandon that standard in job ads to say you shouldn't be able to, or you just shouldn't make a university degree a requirement for recruitment to any job, do you think?
Well, I mean, if you need a formal qualification in order to do the job, then sure. I mean, I would.
I'm leaving. I'm
yeah.
so. I mean, I expect we should probably, doctors should probably have medical degrees. I get that. But I mean, just away from sort of professional, sort of.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't see what. Yeah, I mean, I would, I don't think if it's not necessary, because let's face it as well. I mean, presumably, a lot of people who have studied degrees, in whatever they may study degrees in, history, English. I mean, they may end up in jobs that, are not that related anyway to their degree, so, yeah.
Thank you. Right, and the last question, it's the personal one. You are obviously you sit in your ermine-clad throne in the House of Lords. You've run the Charity Commission. You've sat in cabinet. Helped run the BBC. You didn't go to university. You don't have a university degree. And we're talking about two groups of people here. We're talking about the elite, the people in power and positions of authority, and we're talking on one side. And we're talking about the people who don't have a university degree and are likely shut out of that conversation on the other side. So of the two groups, which are you?
Well, I sit in both. I do. Sometimes I feel myself I'm a bit sort of conflicted, and I don't quite know. I've got sort of several voices sometimes going on in my head at the same time. But so yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who, as you say, I didn't go to university. I started working life as a secretary, and but managed to steadily and stealthily, I suppose, sort of switch over onto a different sort of ladder. But yeah, I mean, I try and retain my my outlook and my perspective from sort of which is a non-degree sort of perspective, but also be confident enough sometimes to share that perspective with people who might not see things in quite the same way, because they're deliberately trying not to, but they just don't.
You are the centre ground in this debate, which is why you're up
there. About that bit.
Which is why you're up at SMF, the home of the centre. So thank you. I've now gone slightly over the time that I promised to talk for before handing over to questions or thoughts from our audience. So there are about 40 odd of you out there. I can see you in the list. Do we have any? Are there any questions, observations coming in from anyone who'd like to? Anyone would like to ask a question, Tina, or say or come on camera to talk? You be aware. There are some of you who are very interested. I'm looking at you, then listen to Tony. I recognise some of you. Some of you interest me. I may come grab you and demand. Hang on, a hand's gone up. Where's the hand? Sorry. Can someone, who's got a better technical ability than me, explain whose hand that is? I can see a hand has appeared, but I don't know whose hand it is. Sorry. Andrew Armour. Oh, Andrew Armour. Sorry, Andrew. Can we put Andrew on camera? Can someone press the loudspeaker? But there he is. Andrew. What's your question, Andrew? Good morning.
Good morning. Fantastic presentation. I've read your report. It's a fantastic report. I've got a comment and then a question.
Great.
I'll start with the question. The question is, a lot of this conversation can appear like talking to the already converted, and it can seem a very complaining sort of type approach. But how can you turn this around to actually a positive action in terms of either a campaign or an endorsement or more media or government support for what you're saying? Because I totally agree with it. And I think a lot of people do who work in education and management and things. That the other point, it's just a point really. I've put a note in the comment. What I've experienced is that the danger of this over university education is also dissonance. In other words, the expectation of a university education is not turning up in the real world. And there are so many reports that graduates are not getting the life and career benefits. And it's another lens in which to look at this problem. And I think it's very damaging for students to have this overconfidence almost in their own ability because they've got a degree, when 50% of people have a degree, and they expect they're going to walk into fantastic careers. And I think it must be a horrible thing that when they realise it doesn't.
Bad for graduates too. Great. Thank you, Andrew. So, Tina, any thoughts on Andrew's question there about how to sort of turn this into a campaign, sort of operationalize it into a campaign? And just before you answer, I'll give some heads up. I will next we're going to try and go to Fraser Wielden from FE Week. And then after that, I might come to Austin Kilroy, if that's all right, and possibly Tom Ockenden after that. So that's the current running order for the benefit of my SMF colleagues. Sorry, Tina, campaigning.
Okay, I mean, just before on that, I mean, I think Andrew's point about, graduates not being able to fulfill their potential having been to university, I think is another problem which we do need to recognise. And one of my concerns is that, the saturation of graduates and them then competing with non-graduates for jobs means that the employer is then recruiting on the basis of, degrees or opinions, as opposed to those kind of credentials that I outline in the paper, which mean that, sort of you're ending up with a bit of a sort of, monoculture where, the only thing that sort of seems to count is what you think rather than actually how you act and behave. As far as the campaign is concerned, I mean, I've deliberately written this paper in a way which I hope people will feel is very positive and very enthusiastic, and that's why I've sort of said that I've outlined those three principles: purpose, standards, and intelligence. I think that they are ones that can apply to all of us, and I genuinely think that if we see and understand and apply them, and start to act differently, that we will start to see results. And whilst if you take the levelling up agenda, it is clearly right and important that there's huge effort now in terms of infrastructure, skilled jobs, more training. All of that stuff is good, but that's going to take some time to come through. And this challenge that we face is bigger than more urgent than those solutions are going to be able to provide. And I really sort of I just think that this is the way forward. This is an issue about human beings and relationships, and I genuinely think that this is just focus on those three principles.
Thank you very much. Right, can we come to Fraser Wielden from FE Week? Sorry, yeah, there you go, Fraser. Go, Fraser, go.
Thank you. So my first question is around, so how can non-graduates who, for instance, go to FE colleges benefit from the social and business networks like student unions and student societies and volunteering opportunities, which are fewer in number at colleges and for apprentices than they are at university? And just a second question really is around why do you think political organisations like political parties, trade unions, have been quite slow in reorganising themselves to better represent and provide a platform for non-graduates?
I mean, I think on the latter point, I think it's because of what I said earlier. I think they've all just increasingly over time, everybody's just sort of, they define success in their own image, and everybody just assumes that because more people from different social classes are now going to university, that is somehow sort of the answer to this problem, rather than recognizing that a new problem's been created by this. As far as the social and business networks for people who don't go to university, I mean, it's a good point, and I don't really know the answer to that, to be honest with you. I mean, all I can say is that, when I first came to London and joined the civil service, I mean, I didn't know anybody, and I was lucky because it was at a time in the 80s when, someone like me was not that unusual. I mean, I was unusual in some respects, but I wasn't unusual in that, sort of, it was still possible to be taken seriously. I was a secretary, but I was taken seriously by the people that I worked with because I was a professional, and I demonstrated and displayed the kind of characteristics that they demonstrated back to me in the way that they did their job. So we worked together, and, I built my own networks, not because I was trying to, but just because that's what you do at work.
Thank you. Now the next, I was hoping to come to Austin Kilroy next, and just to further down the list, after Austin, I'm going to go to Nina Chahan, if that's okay, and then following Nina, I'd like to go to the person currently identifying themselves as Maud Goodhart, although Maud, I know you're not actually called Maud, but I'm going to call you Maud when you come on camera later. So Austin Kilroy.
Great. Hi, thanks a lot. So I had one comment and a couple of questions. So maybe you can pick and choose which to respond to. So on the comment, I thought it's a really provocative, interesting paper. It seems to me there's quite a wealth of evidence from social psychology and political science that you could further bring in to sort of support and develop and further nuance some of the diagnostics of the problem. But in the way, maybe the diagnostics is not really the big contribution, because I think a lot of people sort of agree we have a problem, and exactly what the problem is, people more or less on the same page. So the two questions really relate to what to do about it. First question is about how changes in the labour market are going to affect the kind of dynamics that you flag up. And I think it's maybe fair to say that, obviously things are changing, with automation and outsourcing and so on. I think it's probably fair to say some things will get better, where you flag up the different types of intelligence and the value that they have. That might become more highly valued than technical knowledge over time. And these are the kind of things which are built up, not necessarily in traditional university education. So in that sense, is it fair to say that things will get better? Will get easier for people without that sort of traditional route in education. Meanwhile, other things will get worse, right? There are sort of niche areas emerging that rely on our connections, networks, our foresight, who we talk to, who are, where the level that our social networks are at in society. So some things get more difficult, but I guess I'm asking, how will this change over time? I think we're sort of assuming that things are static, but actually they're changing very fast. So it's wise to kind of have that forward-looking view. The second question is much quicker. It's just very practical thoughts on how to implement and operationalize the three principles that you've proposed. Thanks.
Thank you, Austin.
Thank you. I think in terms of changes to the labour market, what I'd be really keen to sort of encourage the kind of graduate class who design and trying to increase productivity and efficiency through sort of lots of different kind of automated workplaces, whether it's in warehouses or whatever, is to recognize that we need two things really. One is that the people who are working in these places, they too need to be purposeful. If you are working in an environment which is very automated, computer driven and everything else, you still need to know that how you are contributing to that bigger picture, and that the effort that you put in is recognized and isn't just ignored because it doesn't fit with a computer algorithm. And if I may, James, just as a sort of, take this as a moment to just advertise my podcast, which is coming out, because I know everybody needs one.
Everyone has a podcast.
But I've got a podcast coming out at the end of this week. And one of the things which I'm doing in this podcast is talking to people who don't very often get heard. So I'm trying to, in terms of your next question, in terms of operationalizing some of this, I'm trying to bring and showcase through these conversations that I've recorded, people who work in different environments, and we talk about some of these different things. And one of the people I talked to happens to be my brother, actually, but he works in a warehouse, and you get an insight from him as to how things have changed. And I think it's a real insight for people designing some of these jobs to properly understand. But I think as far as operationalizing it, I mean, this is sort of something which I've started a conversation and I want it to continue. And if I look to you guys as well, and sort of with these big brains to sort of help put this into practice.
Thank you. Now, we've got 10 minutes left, Tina, so we're going to try and
Okay.
to a few. What I'm going to do is David Goodhart from elsewhere in think tank land, Pulse Exchange, can't come on camera, but I'll just read out his question very briefly. Then I want to go to Nina Chauhan and then Tess Waring, and that may be us done, I think. To David's question, David writes, more than 1/3 of jobs in the UK labour market are graduate only. Many of the best ones, should employers be constrained from advertising for jobs in this way? Should there be a ban on advertising for graduate jobs? And also, how do you think we can keep more non-graduate channels into graduate jobs like nursing? So, any thoughts on graduate and non-graduate recruitment to those trades?
Well, I mean, I suppose, like I said to you earlier, I mean, I don't really see why employers require a degree for a job that doesn't require a specific degree in order to do it. I don't really get what that gives you. So I wouldn't, it'd be nice to think that we could move away from that. I mean, as far as other non-graduate, the sort of roles like, the sort of more, sort of skill-based type sort of work. I mean, I think there's a danger of always trying to, sort of give status to a job or a position by making it, a graduate status. And I don't think that necessarily is the answer. I mean, nursing now, it's kind of, that's happened some time ago in terms of, that becoming a graduate career. I think more recently, the decision of, around making sort of it a requirement for the police to become sort of graduates, I find that to me is concerning somewhat, because, police are, of us, and if they've now all got to be graduates in order to be policemen, that I find quite troubling. And when you look at sort of situations like we've got at the moment, M25 blockades and everything else, we don't want, all of our policemen to sort of respond to these situations, as graduates necessarily.
Yes. I think we got the point. Now we've got 7 minutes left, and I should say, sorry, David Goodhart's book to advertise, most recent, and sorry, Dave, if I get the order right, Head, Heart, Brain. Anyway, look, Google there, David Goodhart's book, your most recent book, which has lots on this subject as well. It's worth a read.
And I would say, I mean, David, and quite rightly, and he's done a huge amount of work on this, and and I hope very much that what I've set out is complements a lot of what he's done there.
Now we're going to next go to. In fact, sorry, I've lost one. I've lost Tess, who had been asking questions, but Nina Chauhan has been waiting very patiently with hand. Oh, Tess is back. Right, we're going to see if we can get Nina and Tess in the next 6 minutes. So Nina, do you want to? Yeah, you can get Nina on. There you go, Nina. What's your question? If you make it one brief question, one brief answer from Tina, and then we'll get Tess in before we wrap up. So Nina, off you go. Oh, you're still on mute, Nina. Okay, right. If Nina's not, unfortunately, they're not unmuting. So can we go to Tess Waring? Nina, just stay there. Don't worry. We'll try and get you on. There's a time after Tess. We'll do that. But can we get right? Tess, can you unmute and put your question to Tina?
There we go. Right, sorry about that. It's more an observation. A couple of things that come to mind. I'm of the age group, I'm in late 50s. So I'm looking at the world of, when I went to grammar school, there was a filter at age 11. Now, potentially, the filter is at age 21. So that plays a little bit into having to go to university to get the jobs. But I partly went because I went from a working class refugee background, and I was part of what 2 or 3% that went, because it was a proxy for class. I was the wrong working class to climb the ladder, but by going the route I did, I then went into a major IT company and then into working in a university. So I think there's an element about why did I do that, the class thing, and also thinking skills, because it's not just about the knowledge you learn at university, but it's also about the skills to think. So yes, you may not use the knowledge, you might have started doing a media degree and end up in something completely different, but you've taken those skills of how to think across. And maybe what we need to do is teach some of those skills at an earlier stage in school, so people can actually show those when they go to an employer.
Thank you, Tessa. I'm just going to give.
I'm just very briefly on that. I would just say, Tessa, that I mean, I think in terms of thinking skills, I mean, what you learn at university, you know, I absolutely get that. You know, you've got a sort of an analytical skill, which is very much what you see in a graduate. What I say in my paper is that, you know, those who have not been to university have a different kind of thinking skill, and actually they're very complementary. And you know, it's often what you find with a non-graduate is that they are instinctively strategic, because they will be people who try and fix problems. So for them, what they have to do is define the problem really, really clearly, and that makes them sort of zoom out, see the bigger picture, read a situation. And what I'd like to see is more complementary working partnerships between people who are graduates and non-graduates, because I do think that will help us identify the problems that people actually need fixing, rather than the problems which a lot of people want to fix, which are not actually the real problems.
Thank you. Now, Nina Chun is still on camera, but Nina, do you want to have another go at unmuting yourself to? No. Okay, fine. I think Nina may have technical problems, so I'm going to try one last question. Tom Ockenden, sorry, and forgive me, Tom. I did promise to bring you in earlier on. I managed to miss you. Now, Tom Ockenden, if we can we get Tom? Right, Tom, you're going to get the last question to Tina. The pair of you have 180 seconds to ask and answer a question before we wrap up. So, Tom, off you go.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much. I'd be interested to know how important you think pay is as a matter of respect. You talk about it a bit in the report, but say that it's not a quick solution. But people working as like bus drivers or care workers, supermarket workers, they were seen as key workers in the pandemic. And so society couldn't function without them. And you often don't need a degree to work as that, but they're often the most low paid.
So essentially, if Tina, you talk about wanting to respect non-graduates more, isn't paying them more a very good and concrete way of showing that respect?
Oh, for sure. And, you know, and I always think sort of, you know, people need to be paid well for the job that they do, and that's a given. But what I think is also important is that people who are doing these kind of roles, you know, they're not to be pitied, you know, as in these are people that should be told why they're important. You know, they are doing important jobs, and they deserve, you know, our respect for the reason why they do those jobs, and that, you know, we want and hope that they will hold us to account, as well as you know, sort of help us sort of maintain and you know, a prosperous and cohesive society. That's my point.
Lovely, thank you. Now we're into the final minute of the hour, so I think I'm going to wrap up there and say thank you very much to everyone for coming. I'm actually, you know, some brief name checks. Like you're looking at the chat panel, I want to say, hello to Richard McAllister, who taught me at Edinburgh University 20 years ago. I'm going to say hello to Tim Bale, who's a trustee of the SMF, and therefore I work for him. And so hello, boss. And also actually hello to Rick Nye, who did my job running the SMF about 20 odd years ago. So I hope hello Rick, and I hope we continue to uphold the spirit of a useful cross-party think tank that you set up all the years ago. So, but thank you to all of you, to the rest of you as well. But most of all, I want to say thank you very much to Tina Stowell for publishing this paper with us. I hope this won't be your last engagement with the SMF, and I certainly hope that it won't be the last we hear from you on this subject. Can you remind us, Tina, the podcast is called, and where do we find it?
The podcast is called Tina Talks to Today's Britons. It's got, there are 6 episodes all out on Friday, but I will be putting on Twitter today a trailer for it.
Are you on TikTok at all?
No, I'm not. No.
Good. Maybe next time. Well, with that, I will say thank you very much, Tina. Thank you for the papers on the SMF website. It's also on the chat panel. Thank you all for coming. Hope to see you again at the SMF, either virtually or possibly even in person one day. Who knows? But again, most of all, thank you very much, Tina. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.